May 1945. All over Europe the lights went up. But behind the dancing and the bonfires lay the thought of the other enemy, Japan. The job was not yet finished. Who were these Japanese? And how had they become the ruthless conquerors of half the Eastern world? Japan, until 80 years ago, was a backward country where the peasants lived in crowded villages carrying on the primitive industry or worked in the paddy fields to support a caste of landowners. For the daughters of the mighty, life was cultured and graceful in the land of cherry blossom and snow-capped Fujiyama. The aristocracy still kept professional warriors, the two-sworded samurai, and these retainers laid the foundation for a nation of militarists. In 1853, Japan's ports were opened. Ships arrived from the outer world, from America, from Britain. Onto a feudal background, a modern state was grafted. The Japs learned science, and they learned quickly. But their new power, their new knowledge, was not to be used to improve the standard of living for their people. The factories were guaranteed a supply of cheap labor from the fields, where the peasants still did a day's work on a bowl of rice. So the army leaders and politicians, the new bosses of Japan, planned a world for themselves. Expansion, aggression, war. The output rose in the factories, but to carry out the warlord's plan, one thing was still wanting: a superstition that would bring the human beings into line with the machines. So a myth was built up deliberately to keep the people working hard, living meanly, and asking no questions. For this, their religion, Shintoism, the way of the gods, was slanted to a new purpose. The people obeyed without question. They accepted the myth. They believed, and still believe, they are all one family. At their head is the emperor, descended, so they are taught, from Amaterasu, the sun goddess. Their emperor is God. They dread a silent power, too holy to look upon, in whose name the politicians can conduct a reign of terror. For every command from the throne is sacred law to the emperor's children. The Germans believed they were the Herrenvolk, destined to rule the world, but the Japs know they are gods. To the Japanese, all other races were inferior. It was their sacred duty to rule and conquer. This myth was a strong weapon in the hands of the warlords, but it was challenged by ideas of freedom and democracy. A police spy in plain clothes was set listening in every crowd. Street murders and organized riots became common events, and terror crept into every home. For those who opposed the government or had dangerous thoughts, there was secret arrest, imprisonment, death. And the warlords of Nippon learned how easy it was to pervert the minds of children. Military training began at the age of 6. Train them not to be good men and women, but good soldiers of the emperor. So there grew a fanatical force, ready to use the vast armament Japan had built up. Behind the frontline troops stood the modern factories, manned by regimented workers, devoted for 20 years to war production. The industrial might of Japan.